Japan, land of the rising sun, a nation known for its order, its discipline, its technological prowess. But beneath the gleaming skyscrapers and bullet trains, a darkness festered. A darkness that would erupt on March 20th, 1995, and forever stain the conscience of a nation. This is the story of Aum Shinrikyo, a cult that traded in terror and brought unimaginable horror to the heart of Tokyo. Aum Shinrikyo's story is not just about a single act of violence. It's about the insidious nature of cults, the seductive power of a charismatic leader, and the terrifying consequences of unchecked fanaticism. It is a story that forces us to confront the dark potential that lurks within humanity, a potential that can manifest anywhere, anytime, even in the most unexpected of places. The Tokyo subway attack was a stark reminder that evil can wear many masks, and that even in a society as advanced and seemingly secure as Japan, the threat of terrorism is never truly eradicated. It was a wake-up call, not just for Japan, but for the entire world, about the dangers of complacency and the importance of vigilance in the face of extremism. This is the terrifying true story of Aum Shinrikyo, a story that continues to haunt Japan and serve as a cautionary tale for the world. Aum Shinrikyo's origins were humble, almost mundane. It began in the early 1980s in the cluttered apartment of a partially blind acupuncturist and yoga instructor named Chizuo Matsumoto. Matsumoto, later known to the world as Shoko Asahara, was a man of contradictions, a frail figure with a booming voice, a self-proclaimed healer who harbored a dark and violent worldview. Asahara's teachings were a bizarre amalgamation of Buddhist and Hindu mysticism, apocalyptic prophecies, and New Age spirituality. He preached about the end of the world, a nuclear Armageddon orchestrated by the United States, and promised his followers salvation from this impending doom. His message resonated with a segment of Japanese society disillusioned by economic uncertainty and searching for spiritual meaning. Asahara's followers, drawn to his charisma and his promises of enlightenment, came from all walks of life. There were university students, disillusioned with the materialism of Japanese society. There were scientists and engineers seeking a higher purpose. And there were those simply lost and adrift, yearning for belonging and a sense of direction. Little did these early recruits know that they were joining not a path to enlightenment, but a descent into darkness, led by a man whose ambitions extended far beyond spiritual salvation. Asahara's true goal, as his followers would soon discover, was not to save the world, but to rule it. As Aum Shinrikyo grew, so too did Asahara's power and his megalomania. He declared himself the Christ of the latter days, claiming to be the reincarnation of Buddha and the only one capable of leading his followers to salvation. His teachings became increasingly bizarre and apocalyptic, focusing on the necessity of a violent confrontation with the forces of evil to usher in a new era of peace and enlightenment. Asahara surrounded himself with a coterie of devoted followers, many of whom held positions of authority within the cult. He established a hierarchical structure, with himself at the apex, demanding unquestioning obedience and punishing dissent with brutal efficiency. His followers were subjected to bizarre rituals, sleep deprivation, and physical abuse, all designed to break their wills and mold them into instruments of his will. Asahara's control over his followers was absolute. He controlled their finances, their relationships, their very thoughts. He encouraged them to sever ties with the outside world, to view anyone outside the cult as an enemy. In Asahara's twisted worldview, violence was not only justified, it was necessary to achieve enlightenment and cleanse the world of evil. The once unassuming acupuncturist had transformed himself into a figure of terrifying power, a self-proclaimed deity worshipped by thousands. He was a master manipulator, preying on the vulnerabilities of his followers and exploiting their desire for meaning and purpose to build a cult of personality that would soon leave a trail of death and destruction in its wake. Aum Shinrikyo's outward face, at least initially, was one of peace and spirituality. The group operated yoga studios and health food stores, attracting followers with promises of enlightenment and spiritual fulfillment. But beneath this veneer of normalcy lurked a sinister undercurrent. Asahara's teachings grew increasingly militant, his pronouncements increasingly unhinged. Asahara began stockpiling weapons, justifying it as a necessary defense against the impending apocalypse. He recruited scientists and engineers, tasking them with developing chemical and biological weapons, including sarin gas. The cult established a network of laboratories and factories, hidden in plain sight, where they produced these deadly agents. Aum Shinrikyo's transformation from a fringe religious group into a dangerous cult was gradual, almost imperceptible to outsiders. Their activities, though increasingly bizarre and disturbing, were often dismissed as the eccentricities of a harmless religious sect. The authorities, focused on more traditional threats, failed to grasp the true nature of the danger posed by Aum Shinrikyo. The cult thrived in this climate of ignorance and indifference, its ranks swelling with new recruits, its coffers overflowing with donations. Asahara's grip on his followers tightened, his pronouncements grew bolder, and his plans for the future more audacious. The stage was being set for an act of terror that would shock the world. The early crimes of Aum Shinrikyo were, well, just the beginning. These initial acts of violence and intimidation set the stage for what was to come. From small-scale kidnappings to chemical attacks, the cult's brutality knew no bounds. Their actions were a chilling prelude to their more heinous plans. As Aum Shinrikyo prepared for the unthinkable, their activities took on a more sinister tone. They stockpiled weapons, conducted experiments, and recruited more followers. The cult's leaders were single-minded in their pursuit of chaos and destruction. Every step they took brought them closer to their ultimate goal, a catastrophic event that would shock the world. On a seemingly ordinary morning in March 1995, Tokyo's bustling subway system became the scene of an unprecedented horror. Members of the Aum Shinrikyo cult released sarin gas, a deadly nerve agent, into several trains during rush hour. Chaos erupted as passengers, suddenly overcome with choking and blindness, scrambled to escape. The attack resulted in 13 deaths and injured over 1,000 people, leaving the entire nation in shock and fear. In the aftermath of the subway attack, Japanese authorities intensified their efforts to bring the perpetrators to justice. Aum Shinrikyo's facilities were raided, revealing a chilling arsenal of chemical weapons and documents outlining plans for even more attacks. The public was horrified as the true extent of the cult's capabilities and ambitions came to light. The charismatic leader, Shoko Asahara, was arrested along with many of his followers, unmasking the dark and twisted reality behind the cult's facade. The trials that followed were among the most high-profile in Japan's history. Shoko Asahara and other key members of Aum Shinrikyo faced charges of murder, abduction, and the production of illegal weapons. After lengthy proceedings, Asahara was sentenced to death, and many of his followers received long prison sentences. The Japanese government moved swiftly to dissolve the cult, seizing its assets and banning its activities. However, remnants of the group persisted, rebranding themselves under different names and continuing to operate in the shadows. Despite the dissolution of Aum Shinrikyo, the legacy of the cult's terror remains. The Tokyo subway attack serves as a grim reminder of the potential for extremist ideologies to cause widespread devastation. Efforts to monitor and prevent similar threats have been intensified worldwide, with governments and organizations working tirelessly to ensure such tragedies never happen again. The story of Aum Shinrikyo is a stark warning of the dangers posed by charismatic leaders and their ability to manipulate vulnerable individuals into committing heinous acts.